Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. All right, all right, all right. For the folks who joined a bit late, they didn't get my welcome. Welcome to the BLOCS Communities of Practice. I am Felicia Williams-Young from Metro United Way and BLOCS. Excited for today's Communities of Practice. Thank you all for the icebreaker activity going into your small groups. I do have a couple of announcements that I really need to make at this point since we're all here. In the chat, I want you to do two things. The first thing is I want you to put your name and the organization that you represent, name and organization. And then the second thing, I want you, if you will, put the issue that you want solved. And if somebody else has an idea of how to solve it, they can start chiming in. If it's something that we as part of BLOCS need to help you with, we will reach out to you. But your name and organization, and from the icebreaker, the problem that you would like to solve. All right? Okay, great, great, great. I am excited today. We have the purpose for today, our BLOCS Communities of Practice is a learning opportunity as well as a networking opportunity. So we want y'all to get in small groups and be as interactive as possible, meet new friends and that sort of thing. But we also want you to learn something new that maybe you didn't know as of yesterday, right? So today we have for our practitioner spotlight, we have Dr. Sean Gardner. From 2-Not-1 Fatherhood Initiative, and Dr. Georgia Turner from 2-Not-1 as well. They are going to come to us with the practitioner spotlight. They're going to tell us about some really cool things that they're doing at 2-Not-1 Fatherhood Initiative. Listen to what they say. If you have questions, you can ask right there after, or you can put it in the chat and chat with them another time. If it interests you what they're doing and you want to do it at your site, they are more than happy to help you get it set up. Without further ado, I present to you Dr. Sean Gardner.
Hey, good morning, good people. How are you doing? Okay, thumbs up. Okay, awesome, awesome. So I want to start off with a video. Jonathan, he's on board with us now. Jonathan's been with us for what, about 6 months now? Yay, nay, about 6 months? Can you hear me?
That's about right.
Who?
I think that's about right.
Okay, yeah. So he made an awesome video. So I want to share this video that he made, and then I'm gonna explain it in a little bit more detail. Okay, let me share my screen. Drum roll, and I don't see it. Let me get out of here. So on my end, I have it set up, and my thought is when I go to the screen, I'll see it, but I don't see it. I don't see the video. Let me try it again. That video is right there. Share. Ah, there it is. Okay. The Rites of Passage program is a program brought down by boys and color. We came about this program for 2 reasons. We knew that a lot of the parents and families were these kids coming out of fatherless homes. So we wanted to create an opportunity for boys who are coming out of fatherless homes to have some form of positive interaction with positive men. Was everybody able to see that? Okay. So just for the record, the thought was I wasn't going to be able to make this call this morning, and then in the event that I wasn't need here, we would have, I would share a few words. However, I think, the question about that Felicia put out earlier about what do we need the most support with, I think it goes to, and I may seem as though I'm being facetious, but in the end of COVID-19, because when we think about kids, I don't know about you all, but on one end of the spectrum as a community, we're having to take all the precautions of social distancing. So it's the mask, it's the distance, it's everything, the sanitizer. But our kids in some spaces are just being themselves. And so they're living life. So the challenge for us has been, how do we allow them to find things to do and still comply with the social distancing restrictions? So some of that has been just going out in the wilderness. Now it's changed a little bit. I think that it's become a little bit more restrictive, but we were able to go out in the wilderness, camp. Every family had their own tent. So a couple of things. So we're not just young people, right? We also believe in supporting our youth by supporting their families. So what we did in camping, in one camping trip, it was our young people, and each kid had their own tent. They literally had their own tent, right? I don't know if you can do any more social distancing than that. But then we also had families, and each family had their own tent. So there were small groups. And I think the most we had was 7 families. So each family had their own group. Their own tent. And then on top of that, we're working to do NTI. And so we're partnering right now. We have 2 different NTI hubs going simultaneously. And then we were part of another NTI, and where their interest for us was to work with their families. And so again, it's a matter of us, a holistic approach. We want to support our kids, and then on top of that, we also want to give our families the support they need. And what does that look like? I tell you what, and since this is also about shining the spotlight on some of the support that we've been able to receive from Metro United Way. It's been tremendous. One of the things we've been able to do, a lot of our families have been struggling with utilities. A lot of our families have been struggling with just rental assistance. We've been able to do that. And sometimes people have pride where they don't want to ask for certain things. So we've been able to, because we have a relationship with the entire family, we've been able to provide families with things that they need in such a way that they don't feel like it's a pride issue. So we're very thankful for that. We've been able to support our kids with the backpacks. And because in the backpacks, as you all know, is school supplies, and they need those items. So again, it's able to take some of the burden off our families. I feel like I'm leaving something out, but I feel like also that's the bulk of it, trying to find a way. Our kids are used to doing something. And we all have to figure out a way to be safe, but we also have to figure out a way to find for these kids to be able to exert some of this energy, right? They have all this energy, and they want to do things, and they want to live life. And, unless they have someone who is directly impacted by COVID, I don't know if they always understand the significance of the social distancing. And even when they do have somebody who's directly impacted by COVID, they still feel like they're invincible, like I think I did when I was their age. So again, that's it for me. I don't know if Dr. Turner or Jonathan has anything they would like to add, but that's it. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Dr. Gardner, my first question is, how did you decide upon going out in the wilderness? How did you decide to take all these kids out to the wilderness? What was the thought process? What was the planning? Were there pushback from families who were like, my kids don't go camping, so could you explain that piece for me?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we've actually done in the past. And I think it just works as an incentive. It works as an incentive, and it also works as to getting families out of their comfort zone. Now, did we have any families say that our kids don't do that? Not necessarily. However, when it came to the families to do the camping, well, that's when it got a little interesting, because let me just say this. We went camping. Let me say that again. We went camping, and let me add to that, with no electrical outlets, with no restroom. We didn't have porta potties. We literally used the bucket toilets. And so I think if anything, the pushback came from the moms who just were like, I'm not sitting on a bucket. Look at, I don't know who, Aisha, look, I love the look at Aisha, especially like, no, I'm not sitting on a bucket. But no, but that was the biggest pushback. But I will tell you this, the families had a good time, the kids had a good time. And so, for example, fishing. So when you go camping, there's a number of things you can do. We can go hiking. So we went hiking, and you can have your distance. They all had the headlamps on. Again, thanks Metro United Way, they had the headlamps on. They were able to go through the woods, and it was dark. But fishing, we had access to a lake, so we were able to just spread out, and everybody was able to fish. And again, everybody had their own tent. So when it came time to go to your space for the night, you had your own space, so you didn't have to worry about somebody else or big, not acknowledging the social distance. I will say this: the only time I feel like we didn't do the best job is when we were around the campfire. And I think that's something that as a team we have to work on. How do we do better around the campfire in terms of social distancing? But everything else, I feel like we did a good job. And I feel like it was something that we needed for our families. And so let me go back to your question, Felicia. When this first happened around March, what we recognized that our families needed a way to stay in action. And so we did something called Motivation Through Conversation, which we were going to do for 15 days. It was online. It was an opportunity for us to come together. It was an 8 a.m. call and it was an 8 p.m. call. And what we did, we wanted to do this for the family so they wouldn't become complacent. Because if you think about it, you're not having to go into the office. You're able to work from home, or you lost your job. So this 8 a.m. call, this routine that they were able to establish, allowed them to stay on the go. But as we continue to do this, we were going to do one iteration of it. But that turned into 6 iterations and 3 book readings later. So in that process of always thinking we're going to come to an end of COVID, we were thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And I don't know if you all paid attention to the gun range, teaching the kids gun safety. Well, that's one of the things that came up. And that was something that we were already doing with our boys. And what came out of these conversations was, well, our boys know how to do it, but when they come home and have a conversation with us, we don't know how to do it. So then it's not only do we take our kids, but we take our families. So, I guess, thank you for pulling that out of me, because I guess you could say it started with that Motivation Through Conversation when COVID first hit March, and they said stay at home 15 days. We thought that we would be over in 15 days. I guess I was really naive, because I thought, oh, okay, we're going to stay in for 15 days, and then we're going to come back. Well, we did 15 days, took about a week break. We did another 15 days, took about a week break, and we did that for 6 iterations. And part of that was, what can we do when this is over? Unfortunately, we're still asking the question, when is this going to be over?
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Garner?
I would also like to add, with Motivation Through Conversation, this is Dr. Turner. With Motivation Through Conversation, we are still, actually they're still meeting. Many of the families are the parents in the community that decide to be a part of it. They're still meeting, and they're writing a book. So they are in the process of writing a book. Every member decided to write a chapter about their experience through COVID, getting up, getting on those calls, staying motivated, and basically what they got out of these calls. For them to still be meeting after we started back in March, for them to still meet and still come together, still do things together virtually, that has been huge. And when they talk about the successes that they've had, that's huge. Our boys get to stay connected, because you guys already know our youth are still going to be youth. They're still going to go out there in the community. They're still going to go out there and do what they're going to do. Well, we're trying to bring them back in and keep them as safe as possible. And that's what Dr. Gardner's been able to do with the camping and keeping them connected, keeping them engaged, because we're making them put those masks on. We're letting them know how important it is for their safety, for them to do the things they need to do, but to still be boys and to still be youth. So that's been very important to us, our families. He didn't tell you that he got me out there camping. I don't do stuff like that. That ain't what I do. But Dr. Gardner said, the families are going. Are you going to go, Dr. Turner? So I took Serenity out. Serenity is my foster daughter. We went out and she loved it. It was raining, pouring down. Y'all know my hair. I'm very particular about my hair. But I went out there and I enjoyed myself. And, you know, we learned a lot.
That,
So
that ain't how I remember it, but okay. Hey, just for the record. So I think it was Felicia. Somebody asked about this. How does it look when you get out there, or how do we get here? But it's also, what does it look like when you get out there? And Dr. Turner is telling you the PG version. It was raining. She was wet. There was some water in her tent. Like, she didn't tell you all that. And let me tell you something. Her first time camping, she was not a happy camper in those moments, but we were able to get her. It dried out and everything. And as she said, they enjoyed it. But it was also some of the other families. And then the other piece to it is swimming. We were to take our boys to Tellersville Lake. One of our supporters has a pontoon boat. Again, you know, we had our mask on when we were on the pontoon boat, but once they jump in the water, of course, no mask, because they're in the water. But I will tell you this, back to the question of need, what we do need is a way to teach our kids and our families how to swim. Because all those kids, they had life jackets on. And I don't know if you recognize the lady that was in the water with our boys, but she's that's Roxy, that's our buddy's wife. And so she's a really good swimmer. Mark is a really good swimmer. But what we realized, I don't know if any of our kids know how to swim. So that's something that COVID has helped us realize, okay, that's a need. How do we address that need? So thank you, Dr. Turner, for bringing that. But yeah, you gave the really rosy version of it. No, it wasn't. Let me tell you something. Matter of fact, one of the tents, I had to go get some food. I had to go some hot dogs. I come back, my tent was gone. I thought they were playing a practical joke on me. I thought they were like, they took my tent. So we were on like a hill. On this side, there was the lake. On this side, there was a drop off. So when I got back after getting the hot dogs, I looked over the drop off. And why did I have to leave to get hot dogs? Because we didn't have beef hot dogs. So I look over the hill and I'm like, wait a minute, my tent's not there. My tent, time up. Oh, okay, time is up. Somebody gave, I feel like the Carl Burnett show, they done gave the hook on me. Da, 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 da. One thing before I go, TJ, buddy, you look good, man. I mean, you look totally different, but you look good, man. You look like one of those geniuses that, you know, you're back in the Beck cave, man, and you're figuring this out, man, and you're gonna come with some invention that's gonna save the world, man. I'm just saying, you're looking good over, bro.
thank you, Felicia, for giving us this opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Gardner and Dr. Turner. I encourage each of you, their information is in the chat. So I encourage you to reach out to both of them at 291, ask them questions, pick their brain, see, you know, if you can, maybe it's not camping in the woods, but, you know, some of the other things that they're doing around family engagement. You know, I know that has been an issue for some. And so they may be able to brainstorm and, you know, help you with that. I want to make sure that we have time. We have 3 presenters coming up for our topic spotlight. There are some needs in youth work, right? There are some issues, there are some needs. There's been extensive research done. I'm excited to bring Dr. Asha Brown, Dr. Andrew Winter, and PhD candidate, Rebecca Bloomer, all from the University of Louisville, to come and present their research. I'm excited that they could take time out today to be with us. You'll want to take notes with what they say, because I'm sure you'll use this information going forward. So without further ado, I will not give their bio. I'll ask, no one can tell you about themselves better than themselves. So I will hand it over to them. Thank you all for coming.
All right, good morning, good morning. So today, myself and my co-presenters will introduce ourselves in a little bit, but we will be talking with you all about the Louisville Youth Development Worker Needs Assessment Project, which is a project conducted by myself. I'm a faculty in School of Public Health, and then also faculty and students in the Kent School of Social Work. And we'll tell you more about what we found, what questions we were asking, and all of that. You can go to the next slide, Andrew. So quickly, me, I am Dr. Asha Brown. I'm an assistant professor in health promotion and behavioral sciences in the School of Public Health at U of L. I also have a joint appointment. So what does that mean? I have two jobs. And so I am also the director of the Office of Youth Development in the Office of Resilience and Community Services at Louisville Metro Government. So I'm holding the space in these dual roles of looking at both research and practice, and just really excited to present these findings for you all today.
And that's me with short hair. My name is Rebecca Bloomer. I'm a doctoral candidate at the Kent School of Social Work, previously a direct practitioner in the field of youth development. And so I'm excited to talk to you all today.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Andrew Winters. I'm an assistant professor in the Kent School of Social Work at the University of Louisville. I was a practicing social worker for about 17 years before I went back to school for my PhD. So primarily practiced in Cincinnati, Ohio, after I graduated with my master's.
Great. So today, just a quick overview of what we will talk through, and it might be really fast because we don't have very much time and we could talk about this all day. But first, we'll introduce some of the backgrounds of problems experienced by youth and why youth development workers are important to addressing those problems. I think it's really important for us to provide some context and some background into how youth development workers find themselves in some of the results of the study. And then we'll introduce the study. We'll talk about the needs and the challenges of youth workers that we found. We'll talk about some implications for practice, how we can apply what we learned to practice. And then we'll have a question and answer period.
So as Dr. Brown mentioned, we wanted to give a little bit of background about why we were doing this study. So we're going to go through just briefly some of the information around youth. And of course, this is a broad overview. This isn't going into great depth, but you may have heard about educational disparities for Black and Latinx students. And so that is really educational disparities that are the GPA, that are in standardized testing. And so we know that Black and Latinx students have this achievement gap based on these educational disparities that are systems related. So not individual deficits, but really related to system-based discrimination. So we know that there's a discrepancy with their white peers in terms of standardized testing, educational attainment. They're underrepresented in gifted and talented programs, and they're overrepresented in the special education programs. We also see within the school systems exclusionary discipline. So Black and Latinx students have a higher likelihood of suspensions and referrals for similar infractions as their white peers. And we know that there's a relationship to failing a grade and then leaving school and entering the criminal justice system. So any of those disciplinary measures that remove students from school are associated with voluntary and involuntary dropout. And that's where we really see that school to prison pipeline, because we know that failure to complete high school is related to subsequent incarceration, especially for Black youth. And then we want to briefly go over poverty. So nationally, we know that Black households are 13.4% of the national poverty rate, but they only represent 22% of the overall population. Similarly, Hispanic population represents about 19.4% of poverty. And we know that children in households of poverty, they have barriers to their well-being. So we see discrepancy in their mental health and behavioral health, their physical health, as well as their academic success. To bring that a little bit more locally, the Greater Louisville Project has looked at multidimensional poverty locally, because we know that poverty isn't really just the amount of money that you make, right? So it's all of these different things. And so the areas of Louisville that have the highest rates of multidimensional poverty are the Russell neighborhood, Portland, and then they combine Phoenix Hill, Smoketown, and Shelby Park, as well as South Central Louisville. So we know that Black citizens are most likely to live in these and other high areas of multidimensional poverty in Louisville. And we also know that Black children from 5 to 17 experience poverty at almost 4 times the rate of white children. So there's an increased likelihood that Black youth are going to be exposed to social toxins, and social toxins essentially are things like neighborhood violence and those things that really impact well-being that aren't necessarily being looked at in a specific way. So how does that relate to youth development programs? We know that many of you in youth serving organizations, those organizations are located in areas of high multidimensional poverty. Or if you're not located in those areas, you're also working with youth that are experiencing disparities. So youth serving organizations and youth development workers, they really work across different types of settings. So there's nonprofits, but there's also religious organizations, criminal justice settings, behavioral health settings. And so as youth development workers, you're really working with those youth that we just described. You're working with youth that are the most vulnerable, the most at risk for negative outcomes based on systems factors. So you can't just have a program and expect that youth are going to experience successful outcomes. The quality of the program staff also influences the success of these programs, as well as the outcomes for youth. So there's really a greater need to examine the experiences of youth development workers, because that is really having a subsequent impact on the youth and the outcomes that they're experiencing.
So youth development programs, they focus on youth as resources to be developed instead of problems to be mediated, and take a strengths-based approach. The altering programmatic content and delivery mechanisms by these youth development programs emphasize youth choice and voice in their offerings. So our study had 3 aims, and today we're going to focus on the first. The research question that we'll look at is, how do youth development workers in Louisville describe their professional challenges? There were a total of 19 participants in our study, and these participants were employed in youth serving organizations, both local to Louisville and those nationally known. To be eligible, the participant had to be employed by an out-of-school time program at least 6 of the last 12 months before their interview and in a direct service position. Most of the sample were female, and most had a bachelor's or master's education. And we used constructivist grounded theory techniques to analyze the data. This is the model of youth development worker challenges that we developed. And there were 3 themes and 1 sub-theme. The theme of trying to be everything else. This describes the difficulties youth development workers experience relating to ambiguous job duties and boundaries by their supervisor, by the program, and or the organization, and not feeling valued by the organization as a whole. Examples of this would be what constitutes establishing a connection with youth, and what is crossing boundaries, and what duties fall in the other parameters of the job, and how much can be added to other duties assigned. The emotional response theme. This describes the youth development workers' response to difficulties experienced when performing direct service with youth, when confronted with realities of youth lived experience, or when youth face negative outcomes, or the emotional response from not feeling valued by the organization. Examples of this would be coping with loss, suicidality of youth, youth engaging in crime, and youth experiencing difficult circumstances or abuse. The perceptions of youth behavior code. This describes behavior exhibited by youth that falls outside the expected parameters of the youth program or the youth development worker, and is subsequently deemed negative or problematic by the youth development worker. This also describes not feeling valued by the organization with regard to training and educational opportunities to better understand youth behavior. Examples of youth behavior are anger outbursts, bullying, failure to engage in a program, and not listening. A sub-theme from perceptions of youth behavior are perceptions of youth behavioral health. And this sub-theme describes the challenges experienced when working with youth presenting with diagnosed or undiagnosed mental or behavioral health concerns within the programmatic context. And examples of this are depression, anxiety, substance use, and medication concerns. As you can see from the figure, these themes are interrelated and have connections with each other.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So Andrew just gave an overview of the model. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delve into some quotes that really exemplify each of the themes that were presented in that challenges model. So one of the first challenges that was up in that top ring was trying to be everything else, right? And we saw that youth development workers saw this idea of trying to be everything else, difficulties that they're experiencing related to this ambiguity that exists in their job role. So we had a participant that shared, well, you know, honestly with us, I really would like to know what my job role is. It seems like in the last 10 years or so, we're not really recreation anymore. It's like we're trying to be everything else plus recreation. I have to be a social worker. I have to be a janitor. We have to do the food. It's just the list goes on and on and on. And it's like we used to just recreate. And now it's like we've added, it seems like 15 or 20 other titles to the list of what we have to do. And this was one of many, many quotes that we received related to ambiguity in the role of youth workers and how their organization was structured in a way to where they're being given tasks that may not necessarily align with what was in their job role. And our next theme that was presented in the model that was that ring that was titled Perceptions of Youth Behavior. I want to note here that these are the perceptions that youth development workers placed on the behavior of young people, right? And so oftentimes we see language that may be using deficit-based language, maybe using asset-based language to refer to young people. And that also speaks to what frameworks are organizations using to talk about their young people, and how is that translating in the language and in the ways in which youth workers are perceiving the behavior of young people. So this particular theme was really focused on the challenges around how youth development workers make meaning of the perceived behaviors. It looks at the turnover in the workforce is another thing that we found. And then the emotional response of youth workers is also connected to this theme of perceptions of youth behavior. So one of our participants, Warren, discussed how the perceptions of youth behavior may influence the emotional response of youth workers. And they shared, I try to tell the staff this all the time, that you're never going to get 100%. You may, it goes happen from time to time, but if you get discouraged because 20 kids are really into the activity and 2 of them are not, then, and this was just an example of how one youth development worker was perceiving the behavior of young people in their program and how they were looking for youth workers in the program to respond to that. And they noticed that there was an emotional response that youth development workers have whenever young people present behaviors that make it difficult for them to engage with them. And the next one, and this is the sub-theme of youth behavioral, and perceptions of youth behavior. Perceptions of youth behavioral health was really under the broad umbrella related to youth behavior. And youth development workers perceived poor behavioral health as it relates to problematic behavior. And so what we saw was that youth development workers expressed a lack of preparedness in serving young people with behavioral health needs or youth with differences as it relates to lots of different, whether it be diagnosed or undiagnosed behavioral health issues that they're experiencing. And it led to programs turning away youth that might have disclosed these behavioral health problems. And so one participant shared, "I was not prepared to address the emotional challenges with these kids. I don't think anybody would be unless they were a licensed therapist," right? And so this becomes really important when we think about the perceptions that youth workers have about young people, and also the perceptions that they have about youth who may be having some behavioral health challenges that they need support around.
I think
There we go.
that-
Sorry, I
Yeah.
froze. I'm back.
You're back with us.
Working at home, internet. So the last theme that we want to show you all is emotional response. And this particular one, and I've already shared how it connects to the trying to be everything else, but here's a quote that really explains what we mean when we say emotional response. Here's the other thing. I want to say that's very lacking, and that is mental health support for us. And us refers to youth workers. My clients go to jail, they go to prison, they just have hard lives. We've had clients pass away. And so just when that happens, instead of acting like everybody hush and don't talk about it, nobody talk about it. You don't hear anybody talk about it. It's don't talk about it. What are you telling? What are you telling? I need to talk about it. Like I'm grieving, like it hurts, like these are my people. Right. And so this idea that youth workers have emotions, right? And they have emotions as it relates to the young people that they're working with. And at the level in which we're talking about it within the program, this particular quote really shows the support that youth development workers need around the challenge that they're experiencing when a young person presents, whether that be presenting that they end up getting locked up, going to jail, or whether that means that you might actually lose a young person. And so with that, there is a huge challenge that youth workers are experiencing in terms of how do they handle their response to their emotions within the program.
And so it's not all negative. We also looked at the needs. And so youth development workers were able to tell us in their own words what it was that they needed to feel like they were more supported. So this is the entire figure that's challenges and realms of support for youth development workers. And I want to highlight that trying to be everything else component of the challenges, it really is the crux of the entire model. So what participants told us is that a lot of times the youth behaviors and the perceptions of mental health, as well as the emotional response, they're really influenced by understanding one's job role. So what am I responsible for doing, and what am I tasked to do whenever I'm in the capacity as a youth development worker? And so if they had a clear understanding of their job role, they were less likely to feel that burnout and those pieces of the emotional response, or to get irritated and to perceive the youth behaviors as negative. So really, when we're looking at needs, that organizational support that's at the top is really a critical element. So what they're really wanting is the organization to show them support for the work that they do. And this means increasing pay, but also establishing a professional identity. So a lot of times youth development workers are looked at as people that just watch kids as they play basketball, or they oversee them when they're in the gym. So they're really wanting a professional identity. They also want consistent and intentional evaluations of the work that they do. So a lot of things that we heard was that supervisors were rarely coming on site to observe them, and the only time that they were really getting any feedback about the work that they did was when it was negative feedback. So when they were doing something and there was potentially a negative outcome, that's when the supervisors or the organization would step in and say, hey, you're not doing a good job. So they really wanted more observation of them in their role as direct service providers to get that supervision and that clarity. For the job clarity, that ties directly into the organizational support. So they really want an establishment of clear boundaries of what constitutes the job of a youth development worker. So that gives them clarity in terms of, when am I going into another area? When do I stop being a youth development worker and start being a social worker or a mental health provider, or those other support systems that don't necessarily fall under the umbrella of what they're supposed to be doing at the agency. So those clear parameters of their job duties are really important. And they also wanted, a lot of times within the organizations, we all know that when we have new outcomes that we have to reach, that we have to accomplish, that are congruent with funding, that sometimes we add additional duties. And so youth development workers were really feeling taxed by those additional duties that were just randomly being assigned to them. So in addition to doing this job, I'm also responsible for this other piece that I had no idea I was going to be responsible for doing, but also I don't have the skills to be able to do that effectively. And actually, I really heard that reflected in the breakout sessions as well. Like with the NTI support, a lot of youth development workers are being responsible for overseeing NTI, but what it has turned into is they're having to teach and facilitate these lessons for youth, and the parents are kind of holding them responsible for something that's not really within the parameters of their role as a youth development worker. So a lot of frustration, and then having that emotional response because they're being asked to do more than they can physically do. And lastly, they did talk about professional development opportunities. And so they identified some specific training needs. They really wanted some programmatic structural pieces around motivations for youth behavior. So why do youth act in specific ways, so that maybe they can be less triggered in terms of their emotional response whenever those behaviors are exhibited. Structuring programming, managing difficult behaviors is something that comes up continually. But also things around cultural competence and understanding differences in terms of my identity of who I am versus the identity of the youth that I'm working with. So there's not always congruence there. Whenever I'm a youth development worker, I may be white and from a specific area of town, but the youth that I'm working with may be youth of color in a completely different area of town that I have no understanding of. So they were feeling a disconnect in terms of those pieces as well. We can go to the next slide.
Did it?
Oh, sorry. It didn't populate on mine. Okay, so what we're seeing for practice, organizations, they have to provide more substantial support for frontline youth development workers. So it really has to be an organizational investment in terms of, maybe we don't have the financial resources to be able to increase pay, but what are these other components that we can offer to youth development workers that can make them feel valued, that can make them feel like they are supported by their supervisors and by the organizations. We also, as I mentioned, racial and ethnic match between worker and the youth, it impacts the perceptions of the youth behavior. So, and as well as their emotional response. So whenever we had a racial match, they were less likely to be triggered in terms of the youth behavior, as opposed to when you had a white youth development worker working with youth of color. They often perceived behaviors to be negative or not expected, when that's not necessarily the case. It's just their perception of how they're seeing that behavior. So they really want trainings on cultural competency and cultural humility. And they also really wanted to understand better how to work with youth with differing needs. So as Asha was discussing, they really reflected that in the cases where they had youth who had diagnosis on the autism spectrum disorder, oftentimes those youth were being excluded from programs intentionally because the youth development workers just didn't feel like they had the capacity to be able to serve those youth. So we need to think about being more inclusive in terms of being programs that all youth can attend, as opposed to only some youth being able to attend. So if they have physical disabilities, mental or emotional disabilities, those are things that youth development workers want to know more about. And lastly, burnout and compassion fatigue are significant in youth development workers. So they're really asking for additional support structures for their emotional health. They really need that support structure, maybe in an EAP process or something that's happening more broadly. But the youth that they're working with are having really significant things happen in their life that they are then vicariously experiencing. So there is the need for more structured support in that area as well.
Forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Rebecca, for that. I think that implications for practice slide is so important for us to think about how we can apply this to our day-to-day work as youth development workers. I think one of the biggest things that keeps standing out to me is this study was conducted. Some of it was conducted pre-COVID, and then some of it we followed up right during the summer of COVID. So this past summer, we followed up just to get some additional information to see how youth development workers were faring under this global pandemic, but also here in Louisville with uprisings around the murder of Breonna Taylor. And so with that, I think it's just really important for us to understand how we apply this to practice, right? We as researchers, we can get into the data and show you this is what happened across multiple interviews. This is what occurred, and this is what we heard multiple youth development workers say. But when it comes down to how do we then translate that to practice to transform how we do youth development work, I think we wanted to take you all through a series of questions. So revisiting that model, thinking about how does this study apply to your own experiences and how does it apply to your organization? Are you seeing similar things within your organization? Is it a little bit different? I think there's great room for discussion around that. What action steps would you take to address the youth worker challenges that were presented in the model? What action steps can your organization take to address the needs of youth development workers that we just presented around their professional development, around their need for having support from the organization, around them having clarity around their job role and what their job is? How can we at the organizational level, that's the one that I really want to hit home, like how can at the organizational level, how can we impact that and address that need? And then what support will you need as your organization works to address these challenges and the needs of youth workers? So with that, we wanted to open it up for I don't even know what time it is and how much time we have, but we wanted to open it up for a question and answer, a discussion. And I think these discussion questions that we presented on that slide, maybe you all may be able to use later in the meeting potentially to engage in some more in-depth work around this.
Dr. Brown, I'll jump in just for a second. It appears to be right at 11 o'clock. You have 30 minutes.
All right, so we can have 30 minutes of discussion and talk through some of the results. And if we need to bring the slides back up so you all can see them, if you want to look at the model again, you can unmute yourself and let us know.
Hey, Lindsay. Yeah.
Yes, I guess this is another area where I think I'm a one staff organization. I mean, I hire college students to come in. But I've been director for 5 years. Over the last 2 years, the mental health issues have skyrocketed. I had 2 kids. One had a complete mental breakdown on the bus. A couple said they wanted to commit suicide. I am not a social worker, but again, I feel like this is a way that we, especially the small organizations, could somehow collaborate on how can we get a social worker to come to my organization maybe once a week and then partner with other organizations so that my kids have someone to talk to other than me and my college age kids, my college age students, teachers. So I wish we small organizations and even large could just come together on a Zoom meeting and collaborate on resources so that we're not all in our silos trying to figure out a problem by myself when I feel like there's other organizations that maybe have addressed this and could help me rather than me trying to recreate the wheel again. So, I think it really freaks out my college students and me for a kid to say, I really want to kill myself. And these are middle school kids. So I just wish we could collaborate more, even during a pandemic, for my kids, because I truly worry about my kids every day. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Kate, so much for, excuse me, for sharing that. I think that that's something that came up in the results of our study, that not only the perceptions of youth behavioral health, but the connection that youth behavioral health has with emotional response. And as that relates to trying to be everything else, right? So if a young person is coming to a youth development worker and sharing that they're having suicide ideation, or other behavioral health needs, it's sounding like there is a need for there to be additional supports within programs. I want to ask if anyone else on the call is experiencing this, and potentially I'm wondering if we can strategize ways to build out what Kate is discussing.
So I would like to add to that, and hopefully my internet connection is stable enough. But I have a youth entrepreneurship program, and we experience that a lot as well. So our program, we have children that are in and out of foster care. We have a lot of children that have behavioral issues. Like I have a lot of runaway kids. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, you know, especially with the parents, I'm one of the first people they call. So and it's always the same thing, you know. Well, she'll only talk to you, or, you know, can you talk to her? Can you reach out? You know, maybe she'll let you, you know. And so it goes back into one of the things that you talked about wearing the different hats, you know. And so for me personally, I have other instructors that volunteer, but it seems like usually when these things go on, I'm the first person that they contact. And the students are very, you know, they will talk to me. But it's like when they're at our facility, they're happy. It's their happy place. You know, they get to do what they love to do. But as soon as they go home, it's like it's the same issues. And I mean, it's even gotten to the point where I've taken, you know, I've let children come into my house just to get away, you know, come with me for the weekend. And again, it's fine. But when they go back home, you know, I think that goes back into more family support, you know, like trying to, I guess, even help at home, like balance that relationship. I did have a parent who is she's a licensed therapist. And so I did have a meeting with her about, you know, maybe having like a small office in our facility where when the students do need someone to talk to, they can go in and, you know, speak with her. And then it was also, we talked about maybe doing like a group session. We've done a group session before with all the girls. But again, having someone on site to where when they do need to step out and talk to somebody, or where they're going to have a meltdown, they have that place to go. We just recently partnered with the St. George Scholar Institute, and thankfully they have a mentoring program called Always Sisters. And so all of the girls, they, you know, I have, with COVID, I think I take up to 30 girls every 3 months. And each one of the students have signed up for that mentoring program, and they are very, very excited about that. And we, you know, we'll start next week. We're starting off with like a sip and paint, you know, just kind of a get to know each other, breaking the ice. And they know that they're going to have this session once a week, and they are very, very, very excited about it. So I do agree, you know, Kate, like we need to have some type of resource, whether it is on site or pick up the phone, you know, to make sure, even if it's once a week, just to give them that time to vent, you know, and get stuff off of their chest. But then I think the problem is going to be trying to figure out how to keep that same energy when they're at home.
Thank you. I think that presents, I think one of the biggest problems is that, you know, within a youth program, we're able to create these safe havens and these spaces where young people feel like they're able to express themselves and express who they are. And it is when they leave the program, it is the external environment and all of the things that they have to experience outside of the program that make it difficult for them to navigate. And so what does it look like for us to continue to be connected to them even when they're not in our program? I think that's another question, another research question as well, but also I think something that we can work through and solve. So I think, you know, for me in my role as the director of the Office of Youth Development, I do want to share really quickly, and then we're going to transition to do some breakout rooms, because I think you all might talk a little more in breakout rooms. But in my role at the Office of Youth Development, we're really concerned with the professional development of youth workers in the same way that Felicia has been working really hard to do that work here at Metro United Way and through BLOCS. We're in partnership with them. And with that, I think as we build out supports for youth development workers, I think one of the biggest things is making sure that there are behavioral health supports for youth workers, in addition to behavioral health supports for the youth that they serve. And what does it look like to integrate that into all youth programs across the city? So just know that that is on my radar, and I look forward to working with everyone here and those who aren't here today to make that happen. But with that, we're going to transition into breakout rooms to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into how you all are sitting with the results of this study, and really to talk through how do we apply what we learn. So focus in on what action steps do you want to take within your organization to help address the challenges that we presented for youth workers today. So really focus in on those action steps. And Felicia, I don't have the power to do breakout rooms. I think you do.
Yes. How long do you want?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. Everybody is going to be assigned a breakout room. We are going to put you in there next. Here you go.
And just as an aside, the questions that we had posed are in the chat. So if you need to refer back to the chat for those questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Hey.
How are you?
I'm awesome. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. It appears that there's like 15 seconds before everybody gets the notification and all that kind of stuff. I like your hair long, Rebecca. That is gorgeous.
Thank you. Well, I had it long for a really long time. And then when I had Naomi, I cut it off because she was like pulling it. And now I've had Rami. And so I'm like, but I'm not cutting it off again. That's for sure. It took forever to grow it back out.
Yeah, I like it. I liked it short too, but you know, it was really cute, but
Mix it up. Yeah.
About it long. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. All right. Folks are coming back. They're coming.
Seeing actual faces.
Yeah, small groups will do it. People will pop off camera, you know, they'll be like, you know,
Yeah.
for small groups.
Hi, Mariama. She was a teacher of mine at Summerbridge.
Yes, hello. How are you today?
Good. So good to see you.
You too.
I should know that Ben is going to have a FAMU background. I should have known that. It should have come to me. I like it, Ben. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. We're down to like the last 20 seconds. People are coming back. I hope everybody had a good time in the breakout rooms. Yep, they're coming. They're coming. Dr. Brown, you're back on mute.
All right.
Hand it back over.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to, open it up for folks who were in a breakout room that had engaging discussion around the results to share what they talked about, what action steps they might have engaged in or they plan to engage in.
I could go ahead. And so in our group, I was venting just a little bit, but sorry, but I absolutely agree with all of like the results from the assessment because I definitely believe we, as an organization that I work for, they do not understand what a youth development professional really entails. I think they put out a job description and feel like the job description, this is what you're supposed to do, and here's the job description. But everything on that job description does not fit into really what they do. It is so much more. It is so much more demanding that they're asking, and so even now, as everyone is doing different things, right? We have to change our ways. You have now asked youth development professionals who are after school out of time to now run a whole day of NTI. So you have, without any help, any support, any guidance, any conversation, anything. You just did it because you know that we are resources for our community and our families, and this is what you thought was the best need. And so, as a director, I had to put those things in motion without anybody asking, but saying at the same time, "Oh, we will support you, but your support is just let me know what you need," and that is the support. So I think there's a huge disconnect from the frontline workers to the people that are above the frontline workers, which means the admin people, the CEOs, the VPs, all the people in the office are working from home have a huge disconnect. They have meetings with things about what goes on because they're asking us to send an email to send you a favorite quote about what's going on, but you really don't really know what's going on. And so I think the action steps first obviously need to be your presentation that you had with your other two colleagues need to be given to the people above us. So it needs to, so those CEOs, those VPs, those people that like to make decisions for us with really not knowing what the best decision is, they need to have a transparency kind of conversation. And this assessment should start that transparency. They also, I think the other action step is that they need to have cultural competency classes to understand where your organization is placed, what neighborhood your organization is placed in, and the things that happen in this neighborhood on a daily basis to know really what happens. And then the next action step, I think, is that we need to have some family engagement situations because there is no way that if a kid is having trauma because of the area that they are, that the parent is going to be supportive because the parent is also having trauma and they need help too. In order for a parent to successfully parent a child, they need help as well. So the steps that we give our children, we need to give our parents too. And because they leave our care and go home, but they go home to people that don't have the knowledge or the steps or the resources that we have to give. So there's no way that they are able to get the same love, the same support that they do in the after school care that they do at home because they mamas or grandmothers. Some people are grandmothers who've already raised kids and now have to raise other kids, and they need mental health. And they need help and they need resources and they need somebody to go talk to because they could be going through trauma and they try to tell their kid something different. So I think it's just it's levels to it, but I definitely believe those are my 3 action steps. And this is definitely one of those conversations that can keep going, and it's very frustrating. I've been in the game for a long time, and it's very frustrating because you have to have somebody that's invested and somebody that is willing and seeking to change things to make things better.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like we opened up like Pandora's box or something with this study, and I think that that's important, right? I think that It's critical for us to not only talk about what young people are going through, but the very people who are doing direct service work in this space. Their voices also need to be heard, and we need to address their challenges that they're experiencing. I know that we have 4 more minutes. Does anyone want to share in these last 4 minutes their action steps?
Something that my group talked about, and not to take too much of the time, was the need for training around suicidality within the youth. And so even getting resources in terms of like the QPR training and get that kind of rolled out to different youth serving organizations. They could do that in staff meetings. They could do that in different venues, but that's something where they would at least have some skills in terms of what do I do whenever someone expresses the desire to take their own life.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I think Angela just broke it all down. Like that.
I agree.
She gave us all the steps that we needed.
Yeah, totally agree. Definitely needed.
Sorry about that, y'all. I can just be on my spirit sometimes.
Don't even apologize. We need to hear it. We need. That's the goal. That's, you know, when we do research, we don't just do research for the purposes of like publishing it in journals. We have to make sure that those who are directly impacted by our findings know what we found, and then that information is then used to change and address the challenges that we see. So that was, you know, not only my goal, but the goal of Rebecca and Dr. Winters on this this call today, was to present this information out to you all. And we'll also find a way to get this information in a document so that way you all can access it. And I heard some folks saying that they want to share with leadership, and in that process of sharing with leadership, what does it mean to facilitate those action steps? I also heard, even in my own breakout room, that there are those who are existing in both a direct service role, but also existing in an administrative role where you are overseeing youth workers, but also being a youth worker. And I will say that there were participants in our study that were existing in that kind of space as well. So we have data that represents them in the results of this study. But I want to say, what does it mean I want you all specifically in such a unique space, what does it mean to address these challenges, and what types of support do you need to go to the leadership in your organization to be able to move forward with what was found in this study. So really, really excited and looking forward to moving forward in terms of how we address these challenges. Looking forward to doing that alongside BLOCS and with BLOCS through professional development work. And yeah. Oh, Ben, I saw that you unmuted yourself. Do you have something?
Maybe that was an accident.
Oh, okay, never mind.
But it wasn't.
Oh.
So I'm one of the VP types, just in terms of my position in the organization, and I actually agree with Angela 1,000%. So it's interesting, having been in direct service, then I also now, particularly working for Metro, find myself having to walk a little bit of a tightrope defending my staff to not have to be assigned everything that just sort of comes up. So I do feel you all's pain and understand that some of us are fighting on your behalf. You know, people are chasing dollars, and I call it initiative fatigue. What's the latest initiative that somebody's funding? And then how can we pivot and do that so we can get the money? Well, you know, that's not who you are. That's not what you do. That's not what your people signed up for. So yeah, it is an interesting challenge. And even though I have my lovely Florida A&M background, I actually am working in my office. I refuse to work from home because my people can't. So I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. That's just me personally. So, you know, understand that some people do understand, but also I agree with Angela, though, sometimes you need to push back to the level of your risk taking. Understand you got families to feed and all of that too in the organizations you work for. But, you know, so, you know, there are those of us out there who see it and understand. And, you know, I've literally had to push back directly to the mayor's office on occasion. It's like, that's not why they come to the community center. That's not who we are.
I have people with degrees in recreation. They have a degree in recreation. They committed their time and their resources to be professional recreators. And now we're asking them to do so much more. So we try to find that balance. I try to do a lot of that primarily through partnerships as much as possible, to one, alleviate that burden from my staff, but two, I actually really one is to get the kids what they need. Don't just say somebody can kind of do something and have them do it. Let's get the most qualified person that we can to do it. So I want to serve my kids better, but then also protect my staff somewhat as well. So anyway, appreciate you all and the work that you all do and have done. And this pandemic is a rough one, and we're gonna have some real work to do when we open these facilities back up for real, because we got these kids working in different arenas. And also to Angela's point, they're in, a lot of them are in environments where parents are doing the best they can. And we know the best they can really still isn't what the kids need. And that includes some of the faces that I'm looking at and the ones that's talking. I did the best I could with what I had and what I knew. And just sometimes it's just still not enough. So that's it.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. Well, I think we have passed our time limit today. I'm going to turn it back over to Felicia. I have another meeting that I'm actually supposed to be in like 30 minutes ago, but this is really important work to me. So I am just forever grateful for you all giving us the time and the space to be able to share this information. And I look forward to doing the work of action steps to move forward alongside you all.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Dr. Winters. Thank you for soon to be Dr. Bloomer. I greatly appreciate you all coming, the information that you shared. I appreciate everybody on the call who's here, who's giving their time, their effort, their hearts, and their life to the children in the community in which you serve. Hats off to you. This is our last training for 2020, our last BLOCS training for 2020, but 2021 is around the corner. I be on the lookout for an invitation for January trainings. Thank you all for coming. For those of you who celebrate, happy holidays. For those of you who don't, I still wish you the best of the winter season. And if you need anything from us, please let us know. TJ's available, Antonio's available, Mike's available, and I'm always available for you. I will send out in a survey in the next few days. And basically it's not really a survey, it's going to be, it's a survey. It's going to be a follow-up to the needs in which you all, because I'm going to give you a few days to kind of marinate. I'm also going to provide Dr. Brown, Dr. Winter, Dr. Turner, Dr. Gardner, soon to be Dr. Bloomers. I'm going to give everybody your contact information. Please, let's stay in touch. Let's find a friend and a partner in this work so that we can all be committed together, so that we can all have support. We want to help you in any way we can, and I want you all to help one another. Are there any questions? Are all hearts clear? Is everything okay for the good of the cause before we dismiss? All right, I'm excited. We got work to do. We are doing great work in the community. I'm excited. So let's get it and let's go.